I think I'll probably go out to the big auction out on the West Coast next year. So had quite a few friends went this year, and prices were really in the toilet this year. I had some people bought some really nice bikes at that auction this year for almost no money.
Well, I think I've seen some of those auction videos, and I've a soft spot in my heart for 90s era motocross bikes. So whenever I see like a 92 RM 125, I know that's dog doo-doo by comparison to what we are talking about a moment ago, but still, I would love to have, and I'd hang it on the wall. I wouldn't start it, keep the gas, keep the oil out of it. It'd be wall art. So anyway, that would be cool.
We had at our dealership, we always kept a few old bikes on the floor, and I had my first bike was an 81 KZ 650 CSR from Kawasaki. And not trying to make up stories here or not, but man, those old bikes, more people looked at those than the new bikes on the showroom floor.
Yeah, it's fun to go see those classic bikes for sure. Brings back a lot of nostalgia, and I didn't have much of a understanding of nostalgia till I became a little older. Back when I was in the dealership, it was always what's the latest, the newest, the coolest. That was the thing that mattered, and last year's stuff didn't matter anymore. But now, last year's stuff tends to matter more to me these days. But that's wisdom, maybe, right? I don't know what that is.
Anyone in here got a cool old collectible? Drop a picture or comments in the chat. So love to see what you guys have got in your garages. Garage. Well, I don't know what's the plural for garages?
Garage.
Garage.
That's French. That's French.
So
hopefully everyone enjoys our rambling.
Yeah.
Plural for moose is still moose, right? So maybe garage is just garage or garage.
I love all those different English things, right? Like, what is the past form of take? It's took. What's but past form of read is read. It's it's all the same. You read and read, and good old English. But Mark, just a random question for you. I was thinking about yesterday after we had talked for a minute, just while we still have 1 or 2 minutes before we get started. But maybe you want to share a little bit about thoughts about technician efficiencies and like how much the service advisor impacts that and the people around the technician versus just the technician themselves. That's what I've seen across a lot of our dealers and a lot of the dealers we work with in our group is we know by the data and by the dealers that actually get their technicians to clock in and out, that they get a better service department in the long run. But maybe I have been focusing or my team focuses too much on the conversation about the technician. Maybe just get a couple thoughts on that.
Yeah, I just got back from Banter Recreation up in BC, Canada. Was out there for a couple of days working with their management team. And one of the exercises we went through was I made sure they really understood what efficiency and productivity are and what impacts those. And then we went through an exercise where we looked at the 3 things that you measure in service. So you've got available time, time that the technician is at the dealership to when they go home at the end of the day. Actual time, wrench in their hand, so they're working on something, and then billable time. What do we bill the customer for the work that they've done? And then really dove into each one of those items, put it in the middle of the board, and then let's talk about everything that impacts it. And when you really dig into that, what you find is that the technician has the most control over available time, which is buy that technician an alarm clock when they come to work for you so they get to work on time. That's what they really have control over. And then when you get into the actual time, so they're working, they got a wrench in their hand, and you start talking about all the things that influence that, it's everything that surrounds a technician. If you want to fix service, it's not going and putting a good commission pay plan or a bonus structure to the technician. You got to fix parts. You got to make sure the repair orders are written up good. You got to have a well-designed floor, AC, heat, in areas that require it. Got to have good part support. You got to have parts people who care. And, when the parts come in, they're looking them over and, making sure that it's not when the technician's got the unit on the bench that they figure out that all this is the wrong tire or this fuel tank has got a dent in it. It really is, if you want to fix your service department, you fix everything that surrounds a tech. And once you do that, you'll find that the productivity and the efficiency really start to increase.
Gotcha. Thank you for that insight, Mark. And what would you say to the dealers that are, they're service department is asking for commission or bonus structures, but they're not willing to clock in and clock out? What would you say?
For us, all the pay plans that I've helped dealers put together over the last 4 or 5 years, we typically make productivity is a qualifier. And so they just, whether it's an A, B, or C technician, they have to have a certain level of productivity that increases as a technician kind of moves up the scale. But you can only calculate productivity if your techs are punching in and out of the work that they're doing. And so if a tech doesn't want to do that, they don't qualify for the bonus. So they can't do it. And you will never improve your productivity. You will never improve your efficiency in your service department until you have all 3 of those items to measure. When you know how long the technician has been at work during the day, how much time they spent with a wrench in their hand, and how much time you billed the customer. And, ultimately, the reason that a lot of dealers focus on proficiency, which is a blend of productivity and productivity, the reason that dealers focus on that number is because they don't have technicians punching in and out of the work that they're doing. And so they just don't know what those 2 metrics are. And so they kind of focus on that bigger picture. And proficiency is okay, but if your proficiency is low, that's never going to tell you what you need to work on to fix your problems in service.
Gotcha. Perfect. Yeah. And I've noticed that with a lot of our dealers is they'll use the proficiency, and at least they're doing something, right? Like without any of those metrics, proficiency, absolutely start there. But once you actually start punching in and out and you start to use productivity and efficiency, you get an idea, how do the technicians compare against each other, who's growing faster or not? And then not just the technicians, but is the service writer assigning the right type of work to the right type of technician? Are we bringing in the right type of work for the right technician? Or is it a capacity problem? We don't have enough work for the technician, right? And it's you don't get any of that unless you're, punching in, punching out via the data, right?
I could talk about this for the next hour, but two things that I will point out to everyone is that one, know how to calculate productivity and efficiency, and 2, if you're going to focus on one of those 2 items, then focus on productivity first. That is learning how to keep the technician busy. That's minimizing that time loss between when they get to work and when they start working on something. So focus on productivity first, get that to be where it's in a good place, and then work on efficiency. And the second item is that, for the majority of dealers who are struggling to find good technicians, when you look at your service department and your productivity is low and your efficiency is low, if you're a dealer that's got 6 technicians and your productivity is 60% and your efficiency is 50%, and that's a pretty common number to find in dealers, if you can just increase both of those by 10 to 15 points, that's like adding 1.5 to 2 more technicians. And so is it easier to fix all those problems that exist in your department today, or is it easier to go out and find more people?
Gotcha. Perfect. I think that's a great stopping point for us, Fernando. Why don't you go ahead and kick off the webinar for everyone, and we can jump in on it.
Hey, great. Welcome, everybody. We're super excited for this webinar series. It's a 3rd part. If you've joined us for the other 2, we're helping everybody maximize and really fine-tune their Lightspeed reporting skills. This webinar is being recorded. I think it's already being recorded.
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, perfect. So on the call, we've got Mark Sheffield. If you've been listening for the past few minutes, you know that he's a dealership operations expert. He advises a lot of dealerships. We're super happy to have him on the call. We're also joined by Bryan Tierney, decades of experience in Lightspeed, thousands of demos. Basically, if you want to know something about Lightspeed, Bryan's your guy. So we're super glad to have him. We're going to start off with Brian Lucas. Brian is partner at the Accounting Guys accounting firm, and I would say he is the planet's #1 expert at Lightspeed accounting. There's nobody on earth better than him at that. And also, if you've watched him work in Excel, he's quite the wizard. He's super fast. And so what we're going to do, we're going to go through this training. I do want to remind everybody, or at least let everybody know, that you can send your questions on the QA tab at the top. Okay, we're gonna be watching for your questions, and then Brian, Mark, and Brian will be helping answer those questions. So don't be shy. Submit your questions, and I'll pass it over to Brian Lucas.
Perfect. Thanks, Fernando. So just to kind of start us off here, this is the third part to our series of training. So the first one, we looked at Lightspeed and the basic reporting and what's inside of it, kind of set. When I say basic, it's actually fairly well designed by Lightspeed, right? So I don't want to take away from that, but the reporting that is just kind of standard and available for dealers, just inside of Lightspeed. And then the second version, or the second session, we went into building custom reports of your own and how to really use some of the filtering and the customizations available within Lightspeed, which if you haven't worked in a different DMS, that's not even an option in a lot of them. You don't have the opportunity to build your own custom report. So it's a very huge benefit that Lightspeed provides. Now, some of the frustrations, which what we helped to provide in those first two sessions, is there's a lot to learn on how to build it and how to build it the right way. And there's so much available that it might have a little bit longer learning curve to know how to do it. So hopefully those ones helped. Today, we're going to focus on Excel from the extremely basic, as if you've never opened it before. And we're going to get up to the point where we're talking about building in automations within Excel. But the main focus is that I want to talk about is how to use Excel as a sandbox that you can play in to determine what you want to see. And then you determine, is this something I'm going to build inside of Lightspeed as a report for my team to be able to pull up and use? Can I even do that? Or is this better held in Excel or some other platform, being able to work with the data? And if you've ever worked with the accounting guys before, you probably have seen spreadsheets all over the place. Where anytime we have a dealer ask us a question, kind of our first go-to thought is, where in the system can I pull that data out so that I can look at it from a really high level to see if I can find the problem and then drill deeper into that problem. And so we're constantly running and building our own reports to in an ad hoc setting, or try to see how we're going to answer that problem. And then if it's something that's repeatable, something that we're going to see happen over and over and over again, or we have the same question over and over and over again, that's an example of something where we're going to want to build something so that that individual has the ability to print that report themselves instead of having to wait for somebody to have to run the analysis. So going to walk through that just high level where we're going to start and what we're going to cover today. So let me get my screen up here for you guys. All right, can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
Meeting. Also, if you have questions related, maybe you're building custom reports right now, and you've been following along with us the whole time, feel free to post those in the chat or the Q&A as well, and Mark will be looking at those, and so will Bryan Tierney, but as well as that the Excel questions. So, okay, so let's just start with the new Excel. So I'm going to zoom in here. If you've never zoomed in Excel, there's this little option down here on the bottom right to make it a little bit bigger for people to see, or you can hold Control on your keyboard and you can scroll with your mouse to zoom in and out. Sometimes that makes it a lot easier for people to see, especially if you're sharing screens. And Excel, there's a couple of things here. So we're currently inside of a workbook. So you have the ability to have multiple pages in that book, right? Or multiple sheets inside of Excel. And so on this bottom hand side, I can have one thing that I'm working on here, and on the next page of the story, have something else, and continues, have multiple pages available. Excel is built in a grid where we have columns and we have rows, and depending on what you're highlighted on, it has a name, right? It's B3 is what I'm on. And so oftentimes when you're working in Excel with someone, or if you're screen sharing, this can also be useful to just help identify where we're at on the page by listing off, on D4, you have this data point or something else. So there's a difference between Excel and Google Sheets. Google Sheets is a good platform to use if you don't have Excel on your computer. It's free if you have a Gmail account. There's also a benefit in Google Sheets where you can share that document with other people who have Google accounts or Gmail accounts set up, which is nice. And oftentimes dealers, I'll find that dealers are they're building most things in Google Sheets because they didn't know that in Excel you also have the ability to share the file and people can update at the same time. Some of this will depend on your version in Excel. And so if any of you are Microsoft 365 users, it should automatically come with it. But you'll notice in the top right corner, I have the ability to turn this into a shared document. And so whether you actually have the full suite of Microsoft and you have SharePoint and you have a whole bunch of extra stuff kind of built out into it, or you don't, you still have the ability to share the document and multiple people can work on it. There's some intricacies there. If you have questions, reach out. But the reason why we default to Excel is it has more capabilities than Sheets does. Excel has there's the amount of data that it can house is bigger. It has some automations with macros and queries, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. You can do some of that in Google Sheets as well, but typically the user interface of Excel just tends to give you a little bit more available. But there's a couple of versions. So if you don't have Microsoft, if you don't have Excel, start with Google Sheets. Most of what I'm going to say today is going to be comparable between the two, but some of it will be maybe unique to Excel. There's a few things in here where I'm going to show you when you first run a report out of Lightspeed. So you double click the report, you click on CSV. You might open it up and it looks like this, where you have all your columns are all collapsed together and you can't see the information. And in here, right in between the columns or the rows, if you hover over it, you'll see that your cursor switched to a little different icon here. And if you double click, it will automatically expand and fit the data or the context inside of the cell, the width for you. Same thing happens if you do that on the row. And if you click in this top left corner, so right in between A and 1, there's this little triangle that you can click on. That's going to select the entire data set. And then if you double click, it will automatically expand all of them for you so that you don't have to do that individually. And so that will help you be able to, okay, now I can see the data and determine what I want to work with in there. A couple of things. Once you start scrolling down, you'll notice I really want these headers to stay up at the top. And so there's under a view option here, we can click on freeze panes and freeze top row. Now, as I scroll, it will keep it there. That's one way to do it. Kind of a pro tip, I would say, is as soon as you pull data out, I turn this into a table. And there's some keyboard shortcuts to do this. I'll show you how to do that as well. But right here on the Home tab, so up along the top, these are all a bunch of different settings and options you have. But I can say format as a table. And I can pick what color I want it to look like. So I'm just going to pick this one for fun. And it's going to automatically try to define what is my table and select that data. And if I hit OK, it's going to band the rows. It's going to give this a certain color. I can just switch the color if I want up here to give it a different look. And then as I scroll, you'll notice it's going to keep my headers automatically. So I don't have to do that extra step.
Hey, Brian,
go ahead.
What's the benefit of turning data into a table versus just leaving it as raw data on the spreadsheet?
Yeah, so the reason why we want to turn it into a table is if I'm just going to look at the information and scroll down line by line, I may not need to turn it into a table. But if I'm going to manipulate the data or do something to manage the data, when you turn it into a table, it it allows you to do things, and it will do custom steps for you automatically. So for example, if I have a table and I add a column here, and I'm going to put in a formula, so I can do math inside of Excel, right? So I'm going to just, this isn't going to make any sense what I'm doing as far as the formula, but if I want to times the cost by 10%, it's going to automatically push that all the way through the entire table. Instead of, if it's not a table, so if I go back and I do the same thing, now I have to do something else to then copy that for me. So there's some built-in tools within Excel by itself where it will just automatically feed that through the rest of it. And then it will format it in a certain way because it's looking to see how you're going to manage and work with the data. Once we get into macros and power queries a little bit later, calling the table is easier than calling a certain column, and you can get more data from it. You're going to notice, and I'm having a hard time. I'm struggling already on using my mouse. There are available keyboard shortcuts, and let me pull this up, and I'm going to send this to everybody. But this is the list of keyboard shortcuts that when we hire somebody here at the accounting guys, we want them to learn these first. And there's about 50 of them roughly. And I'll just kind of high level show you what I'm trying to do here in this data set. So control on your keyboard, if you hold control, then there's options as you hold control. So if I use my arrow keys, like my up arrow, then it will go all the way until it finds the last data point. If I hit my down arrow, same thing. So it's kind of a navigation. Is when I think about control, I think about navigating to quickly move between my spreadsheet. If I hold control and hit my home button, it will take me to the first cell that had data in it. If I hold control and hit my end button, it will take me to the last cell or take me to the furthest bottom right section where there will be data display. So control, your arrow keys, home and end keys, they'll help you move between your data set. If I use my page up or page down button, so remember we're in a book and we've got pages here, my page up and page down will take me through my pages if I hold control. So that your control key will help you with navigating. Your Alt button on your keyboard, when I hit Alt, you'll notice that something changed up along the top. And it's basically giving a key for each of the options in my ribbon up here. So if I want to learn the keyboard shortcut to add a color to something, I'm first going to click on an H after I hit Alt. Then it looks like there's an H under that color. And then I can use my arrow keys and pick a color. And over time, if you train yourself to use your keyboard, you'll become extremely fast in Excel. Kind of a fun little story. When I first started the accounting guys, I thought I was pretty decent in Excel. I had done some schooling, at a university, did an Excel course. I was working in the banking industry, doing some underwriting and, branch management, some selling and stuff like that. And built a whole bunch of fun little things in Excel that would help me do my job a little faster. And I started working here, and one of the owners at the time, I went to go watch him work on something. He never touched his mouse once. I was like, how the heck? And he just started maneuvering through spreadsheets and like building things and it took him like 5 minutes what it would take me to, build something in like an hour. And so I wanted to figure out how to get good at that. And so he made it really easy for me. He walked over to my computer and unplugged my mouse and said, you can't work with a mouse today. So I had to learn really fast, how to, figure out what those keyboard shortcuts were. But now it's kind of, I almost use the mouse and I feel like I'm learning a new program if I don't use my keyboard shortcut. So you can do a lot with when you're working in and practicing in Excel, that it becomes muscle memory. And we'll go ahead and move on from there. If you're going to use Excel, I would say learn some keyboard shortcuts. And those keyboard shortcuts will also roll into Lightspeed. Lightspeed's got a lot of keyboard shortcuts that you can use to speed up some processes. But a couple of
same Same
Go
thing
ahead.
with the alt and the control buttons inside of Lightspeed. You can learn to use the shortcuts there. And to your point, Mr. Lucas, you could unplug your mouse and throw it away if you wanted to.
Yep. And so I just one keyboard shortcut. If you hit F10, that opens up your menu. And then you'll notice there's a little underline under the characters. So if I hit B, that's going to activate that button. And then if I hit like the R, if I hold Alt and hit R, it'll activate that button. So learning the shortcuts in Lightspeed or Excel, there's some pretty significant things. Just one simple solution here. When we get a new dealership, we always go into their suppliers and kind of review and see how the settings are set in here. So I want to turn on accounting entries, and I don't want to have to click here and then here and then here to get to my next one. I'm just going to Alt S or hit Alt X to hit next and go to the next one. And space bar will activate your buttons as well. And it just allows you to quickly move through things way faster than having to click around. Yeah, shortcuts are super useful. Few things along the home tab. So back to kind of like the table question. I could format this, give it a color. I could choose to, I want to make this stand out so it looks like a little bit more blocked, or when I print it, it'll have more outlines on it. And you can bold, you can italicize, and make things stand out and start to build what a report would look like. But if you turn it into a table, it just will do that for you a little bit faster. Couple things to think about when you're in here and you're looking at data before you're going to play with the information is, what is the data type, right? So Mark talked about this in our last session, is sometimes it is actually in a dollar amount. Sometimes it's a date, sometimes it's text. And depending on what the data type is, you can interact with it differently. And so you might need to switch it from one data type to another. Same thing with your date fields. You can switch data types here. So sometimes when you're going to play with the information and you're not quite sure what the data type is, you can pull that report out of Lightspeed, have the data type, and figure out with formulas, okay, I need to switch this to be a number data type. And instead of having to build that calculated field in Lightspeed to switch the data type first, because maybe that's not actually the one that I really need, but it's quicker to just switch the data type using one of these options. And then once you've figured out what you need, that's when I go back into Lightspeed, build the report the way I need it to work. And Excel is, so when I work with dealerships, most of what I see it used for is kind of a checklist, right? Like they might use this report. This is giving us major unit inventory, and they might just have this as as a little count sheet. And I'm going to go down as I look at these units, and I'm going to say, yep, this is here, this is here, this is here, right? And they just use it to notate stuff, which that is helpful, and that's for us at the Accounting Guys, we work with just over 300 dealerships that are in Lightspeed on a monthly basis. We don't print anything. We don't have paper. We don't print a ton of paper. If you have your printers printing off a bunch of paper you never use, there's settings in there to not make your printer print. But if we see a lot of dealers that they'll have printed something, use highlighters or scratch stuff off, and then they spill something on it. And if it's in Excel, it's just cleaner, it's neater. You don't have to worry about handwriting, right? You can quickly just say this is done, or make your notes, and you can save it. And you can email it to somebody without having to rescan it and send it somewhere else. So it can be used to take notes or to assign out tasks as well, as far as the tool. And something that you can do is kind of the next level, apart from, okay, I'm going to use this to take notes, or I'm going to use this to mark stuff off, is I can use it to think for me. When if you've been in Excel, that you're getting more intermediate or advanced in Excel, the more how to make Excel work for you and think for you, so your brain doesn't have to focus on too much information. So I'm going to bring that up a couple times as we move through this. And one of the things is using a formula. So there is ways to pull and grab data or summarize the data using a bunch of different functions inside the system. Up here in this little direction bar here, this function bar, this is where you can build and create your own custom rules, or for Excel to then do something for you. You click on this little function button, you can say, what are you trying to do? And if I want to add something, sometimes it will give you a recommended formula, but you don't really need this anymore. This is kind of going away if you have ChatGPT. ChatGPT is better, and we're going to use that just a little bit. But you can use this formula bar to work through the data a little bit more. Give me just a second to give you an example. So here I have a tab where I have a list of stock numbers. And this page, I also have units where stock number is available. So in a real world scenario, maybe you are pulling a floor plan report. What units do I have on floor plan? And what is the cost of those units? And then in Lightspeed, I can pull this report that gives me, here's my units in inventory, and this is what my invoice cost is. And you're wanting to see if they agree with each other, right? So want to see if does the data line up? And so the second tab, if I have stock numbers here, I can use a formula to work for me. So this is one of the most common formulas that we use. It's the VLOOKUP formula. And the way that you start a formula inside of a cell is you type equal, and then you start typing your formula. You don't have to type the entire thing, but if you hit tab, it's now selected that formula, and then it's going to give you what you need to do in order to use this formula. So I know that some of you might be more advanced Excel, and you're like, why aren't you using an XLOOKUP? They do similar things, but on this VLOOKUP, it's asking me to look up a value. So I'm trying to look up this value of this stock number in this cell in A2, and then to get to my next step, I hit comma, and now it's saying, give me the table that I'm going to look at in this table array. So I'm going to reference a different page, and I have my stock numbers here, and I'm going to go ahead and select the column. And in a VLOOKUP, you have the ability to pull back whatever column you want after it. So I want, in this example, if I'm trying to see what did I have on floor plan, if my other sheet had the floor plan cost, I want to see, do we match? I can highlight from my stock number over to my invoice cost, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 columns within my selection. So if I hit comma, it's going to ask me what column do I want to bring back, and I'm going to put column 9, and then I'm going to hit enter. And so it went over to this sheet, found the stock number, and it called back my invoice cost. If it found that specific stock number. And then I can take this and I can copy it down. You'll notice I don't know if I can zoom in quick enough here or big enough to see it, but if you're highlighted on a cell, there's this little green box. And if you double click on it, it will take what you have and copy it down as far as it can find something on the left, basically left of it, and it will copy your formula down to the bottom. That's a quick way to kind of pull that down. Another way that you can do that, if you want to, is you can just select the cells you want it to copy down below. If you hold Control and then D on your keyboard, that's Control down. You also have the ability to take a formula and take it to the right with Control R. We'll copy it to the right. It might not work depending on what you're looking at, but it will take that information in the cell that you had selected and copy it down or to the right. You can also Control C, and this is what everybody else is used to, right? Control C will copy that cell, and then you can Control V, and it will paste it to the other cells that you put it in. So there's, again, some keyboard shortcuts, or you can right click, and there's some copy and paste functionality as well. And hey, you'll Brian, notice in my, yeah, go ahead.
I was always a VLOOKUP junkie, and maybe not to get our meeting off track today, but have you started transitioning over to XLOOKUP?
So our entire firm uses XLOOKUP if it's going to be a document that we, because all of us have the updated Excel version. If I'm going to send something to a client, I still use VLOOKUP because most of our
doesn't work on older versions of Excel.
XLOOKUP doesn't work on all the versions. Yep. But just to show you what that does, because it's actually kind of cool, is XLOOKUP, and I'm going to say look up a value. I want to look up this value, and then I look at my lookup array. So I'm looking this up, and then I hit comma, and my return array. I'm going to return that column. So I don't have to remember the number of columns anymore. And it doesn't matter if it's to the right or to the left. It's just look up this column, return this column. And then if you hit enter, it'll pull it in.
That's really one of the nice benefits with XLOOKUP is that, with VLOOKUP, you could only go to the right of the lookup column. And so sometimes you have to create helper columns, but with XLOOKUP, you can go to the left of the column where you're looking up the data.
Correct. And then the other thing that you can do, if I wanted to, so I'm going to just start this over, is I can pull back multiple columns in one go. So I'm going to look up this, and I want to return these 4. And it's going to automatically put those into their own columns. And so this is the year now, but you can see when I'm hovered on it, it's all part of the one formula, and it breaks it out and splits it out for me. So that's also super, can be useful. So I don't have to build this formula 5, 6, 7, 8 times. I can just have it with the single, with the one formula. And this is, I know this is getting really nerdy really fast. I don't have any chance, I'm not going to have time to jump over and look in the chat, but ask any question. If I click on something and didn't, if you're like, how did you just do that? Because you didn't say how I did that. Let me know in the chat. But 9 times out of 10, when we're working with a dealership, it is always, I have report A and I have report B, and I need to know if they agree with each other. And so learning to use VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP makes that super simple, as long as you can identify a bridge, right? Is there something between the 2 reports that is the same? And as long as I have something between the 2, whether that's a VIN number, the stock number, invoice number, supplier code, supplier ID, document number, as long as I can identify that there's something that is the same, but within both reports, then I can build a formula to pull the data over together quickly and easily identify the differences. This little error message here is saying I looked within what you've given me and I couldn't find anything. It doesn't exist. And sometimes it might be that it's one character off, or maybe you don't have enough of the information back and forth, but that can help you identify quickly, okay, those ones I need to go double check. I've got to go look at. Sometimes you realize that there's going to be data that you don't want to see. Another common formula that we'll use is if there's an error, and what I'm showing here is you can use multiple formulas at once. So if there's an error with this function, I don't want you to give me this. I want you to say something else. If you tell it to tell you something, you have to put quotes. Just like in Lightspeed, if we build that into a custom formula. So we put quotes and then put what we want in between. Then I hit enter. And when I copy that down, now it will read, check this. Or, if I just want it to be a 0, I can have it return a 0 so that you might have another formula that is grabbing from this data. And if you have that error, it won't work. So you have to have it replaced with a 0. So there's a lot that you can do with these formulas. Now, this is where I'm going to use ChatGPT in a couple of different examples where if you don't remember what I just went through, right? And if you've never done this before, I'm going to open up ChatGPT and I'm going to say, so with ChatGPT, you have to be very specific and it'll do exactly what you want, right? You have to have a good enough input. So I'm in sheet and tell it where I'm at. Well, and sometimes you don't have to say all of this stuff. I'm actually going to start by just saying in A2, right? So right here, I want it to look at sheet MU. So here's my other sheet. Column B, and return, we'll do I for fun. The info in column I if B and A2 are the same. Can you give me a formula? So here's the example of the formula. And I just hit copy. I can go back over to here. I can paste it in, and there it's done. So I don't have to learn all of this stuff necessarily anymore. If you do learn it, you'll become better at being able to use ChatGPT to build formulas for you. But that can be very helpful for a variety of things. So I'm going to show you another example of that real quick. Let me find. Go ahead.
I used to pride myself in my Excel formula writing skills, but they are severely atrophying at this point in time. Now that I'm using ChatGPT, and I have actually gone through and taken some old formulas and actually just run them through chat and said, hey, can you streamline these? You know, things that I did back in the day where spreadsheets got slow or wonky, and it'll clean them up and make them better.
Yeah, and we do that. I would say that, you know, how do I make that more efficient? Or maybe this works in Excel, but it doesn't work in Google Sheets. And so I'll say, I'm working in Google Sheets and it didn't work. And so then sometimes it will, oh yeah, you're in Sheets, so let's do this a little differently. Or we use it within our reporting all the time to say, this is what I have, is there a better way? So here's another, go ahead.
Sorry to keep interrupting. I was going to say what I found works even better now is if you get an error message in Excel, it's just to screenshot that and paste it into ChatGPT. And that way it knows exactly what's going wrong.
What you're seeing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So here's a report that I've ran and going to show you kind of a formula where, you know, here's a practical example of why I want Excel to work for me, right? So I ran the 816 report out of Lightspeed, which has the management activity by sales category information. I did customize this report and I added some of the chart of account field tables into here. And kind of what started this is we had a dealer that had the question, are my sales categories mapped correctly? You know, how are things flowing from the front end of the system, being parts, service, and sales, to accounting? And is there something weird? And so we built this report to give us the data. And I don't want to just scroll through this, you know, to try to see, oh, well, where did this go? Right? It's a lot of information. And in fact, if I go down to the bottom of this, there's, you know, 9,000 rows of data. I didn't build this to read and spend time reading. I got this report to then summarize data and then maybe look at it a little differently. So we're going to talk about pivot tables in a second, but I've formatted this into a pivot table. And so I don't have to look at every single row. Now I've only got 260 rows to look at. But here I have a column that has action item types, and this is coming from one of the tables in the 816 report. And then I have account type, which is coming from the chart of accounts table that I added into my custom report. And so here are my options that I have on the action item types. I've got cost, parts, inventory, rebate, sales, service, and units. And then here are the account types that I have available in this. And if I didn't know how to use formulas, I would just start scrolling through and say, well, that one looks funny because I have a cost action item type that linked to revenue. And I'd have to start, you know, I'd scroll down and I have to read, right? But if you're using Excel, you don't have to do that, right? That's what we're trying to train here. So over here, I have a formula that I've built, and you can expand this and kind of see the formula a little bit more. And I've told it, if it says sales and it says revenue, right? So then I don't need to look at it. But if it doesn't say, if I find sale and it doesn't find revenue, I want it to tell me to check it and go look for it. And so I just told it with all of the action item types versus all of the account types, if it falls in this criteria, don't tell me anything. I want it to be blank. But if it falls outside of that criteria, I need to go look at it. So then I can quickly see, oh, these ones are funny. I have a rebate line item mapped to an asset account and a sale mapped to an asset account, and can quickly identify where the issues are versus taking this report that has way too much information to be able to consume. So there's another quick little example of using a formula. And when you're building some formulas, there's some tricks. Let me pull up another file I've got here. By the way, I used ChatGPT to create this file, so this isn't like the format that any of you should be building necessarily. It was just, I wanted to be able to show you how to use what's called an absolute reference, or relative or absolute references. So here I've got salespeople and I've got sales for a couple months. This total sales is just doing a total of those columns. And so that's easy to build, easy to copy down, bring together. This commission is doing something a little bit different in here. So I've got my sales times my commission rate is what that number is. And some people would just, rebuild that formula and okay, now they're all working, right? That is one way to do it. The easier way is you lock the cell you're referencing by hitting F4 on your keyboard, and it will lock it. So if I copy that down, it's always going to reference that cell that I locked. You have the ability to lock not the one cell, but I can lock the position. So I can lock the number, so it'll always be 1, but I can have it go to multiple columns or multiple rows, or I can have it lock the column I'm on and allow the number to go down if I wanted to. So if I to see what that looks like, it went down 1 row, but it stayed in the same column. Some of that happens naturally when you're copying things down, but when you're building formulas, you can lock what cell it's referencing. Now, another thing that you could do, if you find that you're referencing something and it's true for everybody, you could also just create commission rate here, and then your formula can just be more simple, where it just is on every single row. So as you're building things, you can look at one specific cell or build a better table, I would say, or the table actually has those identifiers within it, in order to see what's happening. When you open up a spreadsheet, if you've never worked in it before and you're curious, like what is a formula, what is just coming from the data, on your keyboard, you can hold your control button down. Then next to the 1, it's called a tilde. It's this little key on your keyboard. When you click on that, it's going to put you into formula mode, so you can see, oh, these cells have a formula, and what is that formula doing? If you hit the tilde again, you'll toggle back to just the function of what's happening. But learning, again, kind of building those formulas in, you want to check them as you're building things to make sure that it's actually giving you what you want. If you hit F2 on your keyboard, that will get you inside of a cell, so you don't have to use your mouse to click in and see what it's doing. If you hit F2, it will look to see what it's finding, and it will highlight where it's grabbing the information from. So if you're ever working with us as we're trying to learn a new, like a template that you guys have built, or maybe it's a template that we have built, often we'll click on F2 and be like, oh, okay, that's what that's doing. I can see, where it's pulling the information from, whether it's referencing the current sheet, or like our other report that we have, not that one. Let's see, this one here. Let's see, nope. Cell data sets. I put that one. Give me a second to find this other file. So this formula, you can see it's referencing the major unit tab with the little exclamation mark there, but you can find where it's pulling things from. So you can reference the same page or multiple pages at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and show a couple of like the most commonly used formulas. We've already looked at a couple of them. We'll go back to this other one because it's a little easier. So if you want the total of these, it gives it to you if you're highlighted on it in the bottom right hand corner of Excel. It'll also give you the average and how many it found. So that just automatically happens. You can click on this number and that copies it to your keyboard and you can paste it if you wanted to. Or you can create the formula. Sum is the most common formula where I just want to add these together. If there's a keyboard shortcut here, if I hold Alt and hit equals, it's automatically going to make that formula for me on the sum formula. There's also why I like Alt equals a little better is if I'm filtered down, this sum is still going to total everything within that range. But if I hold Alt equals, now that I have something filtered, it's going to create a subtotal formula for me. And subtotal will give me what it can see. So it's 41.6. If I bring back the last person, now it's 54.1. So subtotal works a little bit better than sum, but sometimes sum is better. It just depends on what you're trying to ask it for in the information. Average is another one where if you don't want to have to type this in on a calculator somewhere else, Excel is your best calculator. So I can see the average or the sum. There might be times where you have, let's maybe say that these are technicians. And we use count if often. Maybe we'll actually do. So if I wanted to know how many techs I had that were A techs and I had a lot larger list than this, I could do count if. So I want to count this range when it finds this. And then it will do the count if for us. VLOOKUP we've looked at a little bit. Sometimes you'll get into data where let me go to another page here for this one. So maybe I'm working in a GL history report and I'm trying to find a column to filter by, right? Because again, there's way too many rows of data. I don't want to look at, if it's more than like 15 or 20 rows, it's too much information. I'm going to use Excel to work for me. And so if I'm trying to filter, maybe I don't have a column that gives me an option to filter by. And so I'm going to create my own filter. So if you're in Lightspeed, this is a common one I use all the time. And I call this first digit. And I do equals left. And I'm going to reference A1 here. And I only want it to bring back the first digit. So I do comma and 1. So what I've done now is in Lightspeed, you have accounts that start with a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and twos are, and depending on what chart of accounts you have, most have the default or the standard chart in Lightspeed, the Honda chart. BMW is a little different, but if the account starts with a 2, it's an asset, 3, it's a liability, 4, it's revenue, 5 is F&I. So instead of having to use this filter to pick specific accounts or do fancy groupings here, I can use that left formula to bring back one character, and now I've created something I can filter by a lot easier. Just like left, right? I brought back the first digit on the left. I could just flip this to right, and it would bring me the first digit on the right. Another one that you might use from time to time if you're trying to separate certain data points is mid. So if I look at my text, so here I've got equals mid. I'm going to look at that text. I want it to start giving me information after 2 digits, and I want it to return how many number of characters? Maybe I want 2. Or I want it to start at the second digit. And so here I can, make another one as well. So left, right, and mid are very common formulas to use. Probably another one that we use all the time is concatenate or concat. They do similar things. So maybe when I'm going to build a table or summarize the data, I don't just want to count number, but I want the description with it as well. So I'm going to hit equals concatenate. I want to concatenate that with this, and it will put it together. If you want a little space in between, you just add one more thing. So I'm going to add a space, put a space in there. I could add my little hyphen if I want, or the little dash into it as well, and then copy that down, and that will go through all of them. Now I've built a new field that has both. And this will be relevant when we look at pivot tables in just a second. And some of these formulas, some of the way that you set this up might be, you might be able to copy this and paste this into Lightspeed when you're building that report again, once you figured out exactly the way that you want the look of it to look like. Another one that's helpful, sometimes when we talked about this in the last session, where sometimes you have a leading 0, or you have or space, or there's a space in front or a space behind. If you use trim, you can just select the cell value, and it will get rid of spaces for you. Also, when you're kind of looking to start your formula, it will tell you what it's attempting to do for you, or what it's supposed to do, if you know what the formula is.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
I run into this a lot where people have trouble finding things in Lightspeed, or have trouble working with pieces of data because it has a leading or trailing space. Could you just kind of talk about how problematic spaces can be? And
yeah, I mean, so the space exists, right? It is actually a character. And so when you're thinking, just from a technical standpoint in software, it's just as if I had an A at the end. And so when you're giving it an input of, I want to search for something, and you don't have the full body of what you're looking for included, it will filter that data out. And so if you have spaces within your data, you might be running custom reports and you might not be getting it, right? It might be, you might be searching a specific transaction number or something, but you need that space bar, that character, because that's what the system is looking for in the background. And we did talk a little bit about in Lightspeed using the wildcard. So, if you were to create a search and you put, maybe it was 20100 and you put a percentage, then it will look for anything after that has a space, but spaces are problematic. And it's kind of easy to create stuff with spaces in it. In some areas, like if I want to duplicate this report, or if I'm importing or exporting stuff, sometimes it will import and it will keep kind of a space on both sides. But just if you're inside of Lightspeed and you're noticing spaces, or like it's leading or trailing on a customer name, I would go fix it. Or on a unit stock number, something like that. Like make sure that you're clearing out those spaces. Anything else you want to add to that, Mark?
No, I just wanted to make sure we were clear on that, because it's just does create a lot of problems.
Yeah, perfect. All right, let's go back to show a couple more formulas here, and then we'll kind of move on from here. But maybe you have maybe you have something that you don't care that it's got pennies on it and you want to round it. Sometimes that's a very common thing. So round is a formula where you can say, I want to round this to however many digits, to 0, to 1, to 2. And 2 will give you the full decimal, or 0, I can just round it to give me the full dollar. Sometimes you don't kind of another helpful formula here is ceiling. So maybe my number here, I want it to only give me $25 increments. So it will round to the next $25. So that's ceiling is a good one where it will go up. I don't know if floor, I think, does the same thing, but the other way. So it will go up or down by the increment with the ceiling or floor. Here's another formula that's can be kind of fun. So sum ifs. So again, I'm using Excel to think for me instead of having to have this template and I've got to go in and figure out what the total is for my ATEX. I can use sum ifs. So I want it to sum the total sales. I'm going to comma so that what I want was the sum range. I'm going to look in my criteria range, which is my technicians, if it's an A, right? So now I've been able to do that math for me. So I've showed you a whole bunch of fancy formulas. And this is where, spending some time, getting some practice, you'll end up you'll get better at using some formulas. However, there's a tool in Excel called a pivot table. And I love pivot tables because it does all this work for you. And so you don't have to do all this manipulation. Now, again, this is more ad hoc. So if I'm just trying to find an answer to something, I might look at my data using a pivot table, and then I might build a template or something that has formulas that are just kind of set that will always give me that data. But let's look at a couple of use a pivot table in a couple of different ways. So let me pull up this report here.
Hey, Brian, before you bounce over to that too, we never really touched on this, but when you're in Lightspeed, you can get data out of Lightspeed in either a CSV or an Excel format. You want to talk about the difference between those two real quick?
I think that's
a lot of dealers are.
It'll definitely apply here before we build something. So in the custom reports, when I'm selected on a report, you'll notice down here that it's got this extra formatting in the view screen. And if I print it in Excel, it's going to give me that same formatting. If I print it in a CSV, it will give us less formatting. So almost everything that we run, or when we're trying to pull and look at large data sets, we usually we'll build a report that doesn't have any fancy groupings or headings in here. So, and let me actually show. So this example of the report that I'm going to look at right now, dealers often struggle or don't know how to build a sales tax report that is more custom for their state and the state requirements and what it's needed. In the system under management activity, custom reports, sales tax, here's a bunch of different formats and layouts that Lightspeed has put together that you can use. But I like to pull the data out of Lightspeed and build a template, so it takes me like 10 minutes to file my sales tax. And so I don't want it to have the fancy formatting that Lightspeed has already done in here. And so if I look at this report, the first thing I'll usually do is I will get rid of the subtotals, because that's going to cause a break in an extra space. I don't want any grouping because I don't want it to create those extra spaces. And so that will help us get to a cleaner data table where the data is all within the rows versus having breaks and things that will cause issues in my formulas. So that's one thing to do as you're extracting the data and pulling it out of Lightspeed. Another difference between CSV and Excel is CSV is it's really a text file. So you have the ability to have as much data in it as you want. And then you might not be able to use Excel to read all of that data just in like your regular screen here. Or if you run it, or if you try to open up, maybe you've ran a custom report that you've built and you've tried it in Excel format, and when you open it, it says, I can't give you all the data because there's too much. The CSV file will house all of the information where the Excel file may not, because it is a text file. And one thing that I also make sure to train or show people is if you're building something in the CSV, if you've added colors and you've added formulas, you've added extra pages, if I just save it in the same CSV format, it drops all of that extra stuff. It removes all the colors and certain things, it takes away that formatting. In your other sheets, they'll just get deleted. They'll go away. And so what you want to do under File, when you go to save it, you want to switch it from a CSV to an Excel file. That way it will remember and keep everything that you formatted together. But it's 9 times out of 10 almost easier to run if you're looking at large data sets out of Lightspeed. Run it as a CSV because it'll be cleaner to work with, and then you can work through that data. Anything else you'd want to add to that, Mark?
No, sir. I think you're on point.
Perfect. So back to this report. Let me get the right one pulled up here. So this 828D report, this is a very useful report because it gives us each individual invoice and what tax category, the tax, the amount, what was the rate, what got applied. But once again, a lot of rows of data. So I'm going to teach you what a pivot table can do. And sometimes I just want to note this. Sometimes when you run a report, data will shift, or it can shift in columns. This is one where it does do that, and I'm going to teach you kind of a trick here to fix it quickly. So you could highlight these cells. If you hold Control and hit the minus on your 10 key, or where you have like your little calculator options, that will help you remove a column. You can also select kind of an entire table here, and you can click on Find, and I want it to go to Special. I want it to find blanks. Now it's highlighted all my blanks, and I can delete them all at the same time. I don't have to do that, a bunch of times individually. But once I have my data in a clean table, so everything below here, this is an extra report, which for some dealers it matters in sales tax, some dealers it doesn't. Again, I'm not trying to train on what you should do for sales tax versus we're working in Excel for a second. But so everything here is a clean table. So I don't have spaces in between my data. I don't have, headers, that would kind of like be the grouping section. I just have a full data set I have my headers at the top, and it's all data and it's all in the right spot, right? So then I'm going to make a pivot table. If you click on Insert at the top, pivot table should be on the top left. And when you click on it, it's going to automatically try to determine what you're trying to work with. And so again, here's it back to cell references, A1 to, it's going to L415. The other way to make sure it's getting the right stuff, if you hit Control A, that will also kind of highlight what you're looking at. And you can just see, what it's found. If you hit Control A twice, it'll do your whole sheet. But you can select the information and then hit Pivot Table, and it will select what you've got highlighted. And you can choose whether you want to put it on a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. So again, a sheet is a page. I'm just going to do a new one. And now I'm ready to build. So this tool is automatically going to do formulas for me, and I can pick and choose where I want columns to go. So the left-hand side is what will display. This is my visual section of this tool. On the right-hand side, I've got this pivot table field. If you don't see this popping up for some reason, up here there's a field list, so you can turn that on and off. But usually by default, you should be able to see it. And then it's reading the data for me. So with what I've found, here's all my headers, right? And it's saying, what do I want to do? What do I want to put in my filters? What do I want to have in my columns? What do I want in my rows and my values? And I'm going to put my tax categories in my rows. And I want my taxable amount. So sometimes when you check the box, it just knows where you want to put it. Sometimes it doesn't put it in the right spot. And so for example, like department, maybe I didn't want that in my rows for whatever reason. I can click and drag it to columns if I wanted to, or into my filters, and I can filter by a specific department. And what you'll notice is it's done. I don't have to do those fancy sum ifs formulas because it's just kind of built in. A pivot table summarizes the information that you're trying to look at and read. And I can say I want to see this again. Now I want to filter by sales department. This is giving me the sum total. I can change this if I don't want a sum. I can click on this value and go to my value settings, and I want an average. I don't want a sum. Now I have an average, or I don't want it to be an average. I want it to be a count. And how many times did it find that item within here? And then the really fun part about a pivot table is if I see something funny, once I'm summarizing this data, looking at it from a 1,000-foot view, and something gets called out to me, I can double click on it, and it will create a sheet with that information. So again, I don't have to scroll through the 415 lines of data. I might summarize it first to see if I see anything wrong, and then from there I can kind of dig in and drill to what I want to look at. You can also do multiple layers. So I have tax category in here, and if any of you who have been in Lightspeed for a long time, you'll remember this kind of report layout that Lightspeed used to have. I'm a little bit of a format Nazi, so I've got to go and change some of these settings because I want it to have the commas. So we're going to add those in. I can also make this look prettier, kind of going back to the design. If I want this to look a little different, I can make it look a little different by selecting these options. So oftentimes you're in a state where you need to know more than just the category level. You need to also know. Let's see, do I have that in this report?
If anybody's having trouble keeping up when you just watch the replay on YouTube, just play it at half speed, and that's the level that most of us operate Excel at.
Yeah, so when you're in it all day, every day, sometimes it's a different way to slow down. But let's see. Department. So this one, my report doesn't have a tax category. Let's see. I don't actually have the other column I was looking for. Give me just 1 second to.
So if a dealer builds this Excel spreadsheet and they've kind of got all this nice work they put into a pivot table, can they quickly and easily update the underlying data and not have to rebuild the pivot table?
Yes. And so that's where I'll show you in 2 seconds here. Let me get tax category. This should have. Go back because I just. So the pivot table, so this is where if I turn this into a table first, it's usually a little bit better. I could turn this into a table, then it has a table name. And then if I make a pivot table, it's going to call from table 2 is what it's called. And if once you go through the work of setting up what you want it to look like, I can come in here and I can update this information. So let's say I reran the report, I could delete what's inside the table and replace it and put the information back in. Or if I've made changes to this information, I can right click and hit refresh, and it will automatically refresh. So you might also have an example where you have your team working through accumulating or creating data for you, and you just want to see what the summary looks like. And you have a different sheet where you have this report built, and you can just refresh it and see what their changes have done. And so that's what's nice about the pivot table. Now we'll talk about Power Query in a second because it does a similar thing. I was looking for a different category, but it's more about sales tax. We could talk about sales tax a little bit differently, but if I want a department, I could drag that and see the department down below. So I'm starting with one category level, then I see it split out by a different category right underneath it. And there are some options as well where in your pivot table, maybe you don't want it to be broken out and summarized in this format. So I can switch this to a table form. And if I wanted to, I don't want subtotals, or maybe I do want subtotals, or I want it to repeat the item labels. And so maybe you've done something to build your own, like a different type of a table. And then you can build a pivot table off of a pivot table and, some extra fancy stuff, but that's just extra. But if you know the format that you need to see the data in, oftentimes it's easiest to build with a pivot table. If I can get the raw data set, I can paste it in, and then I can refresh my pivot table, and I can now I have it grouped and summarized in a fashion for me to be able to file sales tax, because I've got it into that area. Now you can also in a pivot table, so gross receipts, talking about sales tax, is looking at your taxable with your non-taxable and your exempt, and you want to total all these together. So I could do that in my data set over here and make a column and call it gross receipts, and I could total those three together. I could do that, but when I rerun my report out of Lightspeed, if I try to just paste it in, I've now added a column. So maybe if you do that, put that at the end, so that you're not going to replace over your formula that you made. But you also can build what's called a calculated field, just kind of similar to in Lightspeed, but in Excel, where, let me find it in here. So under pivot table, I can create a field, and I can do a calculated field. I'm going to call this field gross receipts. And what am I going to do with it? I want to grab my tax amount plus my non-tax amount plus my exempt amount. I'm going to hit OK. Now it's in my table over here. So I didn't have to do anything I didn't need this over here. And I didn't need to change what my data dump came out of Lightspeed. I can just replace the data here, and I've got the formula built within my table for gross receipts. So you can do calculated fields, and you can kind of sort and filter and do all that fun stuff within the pivot table. Mark, how do you use pivot tables often, or do you jump to Power Query, or what do you do to summarize data? Just as
I've been really moving recently over to Power Query, just because I kind of like the functionality that it provides. I think I used macros a lot in the past, and so but I do like that ability. We talked about it a little bit yesterday about being able to set up Power Query to where when you just put files in a particular folder, that it will automatically pull them in when you open that sheet. So it's kind of the direction that I'd be moving in. I do really like pivot tables. Okay. I think you kind of touched on a key point when we started on this, which was that example, and I think I was the one who reached out to you on that. Had a dealer that had thousands of sales categories in Lightspeed, and they had contacted me and said, we're having some problems in Lightspeed, we're getting some bad data, and they thought it was the system. And ultimately what we figured out was they had too many people who had gone in over the years and set up sales categories that didn't know what they were doing, and the bad data was being generated by bad sales categories. And so that system you designed there made it easy to figure out what those problems were.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll kind of look at Power Query in just a second. I'm going to show a couple of things before we go to Power Query. If you're getting, you can see how quick it is when you start working in here, where you have multiple sheets of data, and maybe you have multiple monitors. I would strongly suggest, if you don't have multiple monitors, you probably need some. There's a lot of use cases for that. But I want to be looking at both sheets at the same time as I'm building things or working through things. I can click on View at the top, and there's this new window option. So now I have multiple, I guess, active sessions of this workbook. So I can be on my detailed table at the same time that I'm in my, my summary view if I wanted to. And you can actually have as many open windows as you want. So if you wanted to have, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, and you're playing with multiple, views at the same time, you can see that. Something else that you might use. So I've already showed you a pivot table, which will kind of summarize the data. So when you're building something, if you've determined, okay, I'm going to keep this in Excel, I'm going to leave this in Excel, this is how we're going to use it, then you should always ask the question, how is the user going to use it, right? So I know Excel, I can build Excel and reports all day long for how I want to play with it. But if I'm going to give this to somebody to work in, how can I make it easy for them to use the information? And there's something called slicers that I'll show you. Let me just let's go to this one. So, and I always use pivot tables, so give me a second to find slicers. So on insert, so I'm going to choose slicers here. Let's see. I have to turn this one on. That's not slicer filter. Give me just 1 second. Where did the slicers go? You can tell how much I just use pivot tables. So you can create buttons. I might have to. This is another good example of when to use ChatGPT. So we'll let that tell me what to do here for just 2 seconds. All right, so we're going to turn the data into a table, and then we hit insert slicer. So there we go. So let's make this a table. Now we're going to insert slicer. There we go. Okay, so you can pick some options here. So we're going to choose new and used. I'm going to use type, and maybe I want model. And let me make this a little bigger. So it's built some filter options up here. These are in these slicers. So if I instead of having to create a menu bar and come and select options all the time, I can now just click this button, and it will filter the data by using the buttons. And you can remove your slicer settings here. So that's one option. This is kind of if you're still looking to use Excel. And part of what I wanted to talk about here is there are a lot of new tools available. So Power BI is probably one of the leading ones. Tableau is another one, where if you get your data into a clean table or into a file that is on your computer, you can use Power Query or Power BI or Tableau to pull that data in. And then there's a lot of visual aids or visual tools available, kind of similar to these slicers, where you can just interact with it a lot easier than having to, click and choose a specific menu option here. So sometimes a slicer can make it a little bit easier. Move into the next section here. Let's get rid of those because that's gonna mess with what I've got going on. Control Z will undo, Control Y will redo. So there's, again, a good example of I don't want to have to come up here and click all these buttons. Sometimes when you're working with data, you're wanting to, again, I've got way too many rows of data, and but I want to know how many types do I have here. So sometimes I'll copy this and put this into another sheet. And in the data option here, you can hit this remove duplicates button, and it's going to go through and remove all the duplicates. Okay, I've got 9 of them. And then I could continue working and building things from here. Another helpful tool in Lightspeed with working through the data, you might have something that comes out of Lightspeed or out of your payroll system, that all of the data is within, it's in one cell, but this is an employee. We have descriptions, we have what type of employee they are, and we have the dollar amounts, and you want to separate that. So you could make fancy formulas to help you do that. But if I highlight this column, in my data tab, we have text to columns, and there's a couple of different options depending on the way that the data is shown. So I'm going to choose to separate this with a delimiter. And every time, if I've known in here, I see that there's a pipe, is kind of what the software used to separate this data. I can tell it every time I find a pipe, I would like it to separate it. And you can see this little summary pane here is going to tell me what it's going to do. And when I hit finish, it will separate it. And so now they're all in their own little column. So that's one way to do this. There's, when you go to build things, I often will, again, is this a one-time thing? I'm not going to spend as much time programming inside of Excel. I'm going to just kind of work through and get to the answer. But if this is something that I'm going to have to do often or a lot, that's where we might build some formulas, or we're going to look and see how do you do this with the macro, or how do you do this with Power Query. So there's more ways to you set it up so that you'll be able to replicate it often. And so
when I do that, I typically add a notes tab down at the bottom that just will have an individual worksheet that has like the name of the report that I used in Lightspeed, if there's anything that needs to be done to it, so that when I open up that Excel sheet, I'm not having to go back and try to recreate the wheel.
Yeah, no, I really like that. We actually do a similar thing. So we'll call it notes or instructions, and then step 1, do this, step 2, do this, so that if somebody else is going to take this over from us, hopefully they can take it and repeat it. Or we might only do this every once a month, and we have to remind ourselves what we did. And so it's helpful having that instruction tab so that you can remember, hey, in this sheet, this is what you're going to do first, and then in your other sheet, you'll do this next type of a thing. So that's a good call out. So hey, Brian, let's see. Go ahead.
I've got a question related, I think, to where you are now in your presentation. We got a question early on in the chat regarding a date that's formatted to work in a spreadsheet report that lives in Lightspeed. So this is at the bottom of the system menu, and I know you've swam around in that area before. Maybe a little bit complex for this call, but I thought I'd throw it out there anyway.
Yeah.
She's got a hard-coded date format in that spreadsheet report and wants it to be flexible. So every time she runs it, it updates based on a time frame rather than having the same date range every time she runs it. Gotcha. Is there a way to build that into the spreadsheet reporting tools, or does that happen outside in Excel?
Mark, have you ever played in the spreadsheet reporting tools?
I don't use it a lot in Lightspeed, but Susie did actually send me the Excel spreadsheets that she's talking about. So I've got those in my inbox, and I'm booked up for the day, but I'm going to work on that in the morning.
Gotcha. Because so this is an area we used to use these, but, and there's definitely a use case for them. We just don't ever use them anymore as far as building custom reports. And some of it is the way these are kind of designed with a very specific format to dump the data into, but it's very old programming logic. And so whenever we build something, we will usually use a macro. So we will pull a couple of reports and we'll use a macro to aggregate the data and pull it together, or we'll use Power Query. It's a lot more efficient. And you just have, it doesn't take as much time to build. I don't, depending on what it is, you might be able to, and we could get an answer to that as well. But most of these, I think the way that Lightspeed has them set up is you do pick a time frame, but most of these are for 1 month. So it's not, you can't run this for a date range, but it will give you that data for that month. And this one doesn't have the same modify
it's a very
button.
very quirky old system. You have to put the Lightspeed field name as a note in an Excel spreadsheet and essentially upload it. And then when you download it, it grabs it.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's one we just, I don't use too much, but but
I think that
yeah,
was
we'll
probably
get to
more.
that.
I think that was probably more carryover from NXT.
Yeah. But good question there. So we'll get some more info. So let's see, kind of coming back to here, what ChatGPT would do with us, right? So in A1, I have 4 items separated by a pipe, and you give me a formula that will separate them. And I actually don't know if it's going to give us one, but looks like it did. So let's see what it does. Oh, there you go. That was pretty simple. Again, ChatGPT will.
While you're using ChatGPT, what are your, we've got, some of this data is pretty generic, but we've also got, some of the reports that dealers work have customer contact information on them. When do you think somebody should share an Excel spreadsheet with ChatGPT versus maybe just kind of doing the way that you're doing it now?
I am a lot less worried about Big Brother than others. I think you can import Excel files into them. You might, when you're thinking about consumer privacy, or do I have social security numbers or driver's license numbers and stuff, I think that information is out there already. So I don't worry about it too much. It's kind of a similar thing. We have dealers concerned about their bank information, which is a true concern, right? And they don't realize that if you're cutting checks, you actually are giving them more information than you would if you would do an ACH payment, because now they have your signature and they have your address. ACH, they don't get that stuff. For me, I don't think about that really. Is where I'm at. But I would say it's AI is kind of scary, and I do think there are certain tools out there that by design they were built to teach you how to hack better, and people are using those tools to kind of test their own database to see if somebody can breach it, and more of those kind of happen. But so maybe think about that before you share your file with with ChatGPT. Do you have something that for sure you don't want to just be out in the ether, because it is, once you give it to ChatGPT, it's available, in different ways to get certain things. But I'm sure, Google and others are trying to do stuff to limit that. But
we're running a little bit longer. Do you want to make Power Queries part 3.5 or?
Are we past? Yeah, we're at our 90 minutes. Let me just see that's kind of the end of. We're almost there. Let's go ahead and go for just 5 or 10 more minutes here. Because with macros and Power Queries, I'm just going to give an introduction. We're not actually going to dive in deep, but if I'm going to build something that's repeatable, right? So I could go and I could find that formula and I can build that formula in. I can also, depending on what it is, so you have to turn on this developer tab, which is under file and options, and then your custom ribbon. Most of you probably have this unchecked, but if you go check it, then you can use macros. This is kind of the older, kind of another little older form of building steps into things, but you can record what you're doing and give it a name, and you might be deleting certain cells and or doing certain steps of your process, and it will save all of those steps that you did, and it will build an outline so that you can create a button. If I can insert a button here and I can assign it a macro, and so when I click on this button, it's going to do those exact same steps that I did to the data with moving the data around. To Mark's point earlier, I might take what was inside of this programming screen. So this is what gets scary. is when you're in here. This is where you might have a bunch of information listed out, and might take that, put that into ChatGPT and ask, can you do this better? Or is there another way to do this? So I'm going to ask ChatGPT just real quick, can you give me a VBA that will do the same thing? So VBA is Visual Basics, but so here's the programming, old programming. Yeah. So if I copy this, I can, let's just go to this macro, this workbook.
While you're doing that, you had asked earlier about whether I use pivot tables or more Power Query. I think the other reason that I use Power Query more as well is because we've been using Lightspeed's 3PA system for years at this point in time. And so with Power Query now, we're able to set up those queries to reach out to Lightspeed directly and extract all this information. So cutting out that middleman, not having to run the report, download it, import it, but just being able to open up an Excel spreadsheet. And when you do that, it takes the action of reaching out to Lightspeed, extracting all that information and putting it into the spreadsheet.
Yep. And that's where you definitely have to learn a little bit more programming. But once you do, it really speeds up your process. And depending on how much data you're looking at, that you might have too much. Again, where Excel, it can't display it. But you can still read it through the query, and you can filter it down and get it to where you could do it in Excel, and dump it out in Excel. Or you can take that data and have that go through, Power BI or some other tool. And so let's see if I get this to work here. But once you get the programming in here and you hit run, I've got an extra stuff in here. So this is the old. Let's see if it did it. There we go. So it did it just for one row, but you could alter that to then have it repeat for all of them. Yep. And so kind of going into Power Query, because again, that's kind of where the world is headed, apart from having these options in here. I'm going to make this table first. And under data, this is where you can call the information from different places. So I can get it from a file, I can get it from a database, the internet, a bunch, websites. These are all different places where you can get it. I can also call the data from the table that I have just in Excel, and it's going to open up Power Query once we've called that information. And then you can see here along the right hand side, we have steps. So again, macros in Power Query, it's once you've decided what I need to do all of these things to get my data organized and formatted in a certain way. If I only had to do that one time, I don't need to go through the process of building this. Maybe you're used to it that you might, but if I need to repeat that and continuously do this, that's where I want to use Power Query or a macro. So in here, I can say split the column by a delimiter, and I want it to do something else besides the space and do my bar, and on only the left one or only the right one or every time, and hit OK. And so now I have steps here, right? And maybe I don't want to show owner wages. I want that to just be removed from the data. And
I believe you could also add.
Go ahead.
You could also add a second one where you split up that column 1.2 to the extract the data
with the date. Yep. And so we could do that too. Yeah. So let's do space, and let's do the rightmost and see if that works. Oh, there is another space. So that's another reason I might need to trim it first. If I just do another space here. Well, let's just go ahead and do all of them. Why not? So some of them had extra spaces than the other ones. right? Or there's a space before or behind, so you can see that didn't work well. So I can kill that step and go back and continue to play with it to organize it through. And once you have built the steps, and you can alter them in here and whatnot, you can also build some formulas. There's a lot that you can do in here. That I'm going to close and load. And it's going to take the information from the other sheet, right? So here's where my table was, and then it will display it in that format. And then people can make changes to this. So again, you could set this up so that somebody has an Excel file somewhere, right? And then you can link to it. And as they change it on your side on this data, when you're here on the data tab, you hit refresh all. It will call that information and then do all of those steps and reformat it for you. And so it takes some practice, it takes some digging into and figuring out to get there. But if you're building something that you're not going to be able to put back into Lightspeed, or Lightspeed, it doesn't make sense to format it in a certain way, Power Query becomes very useful. And you can use Power BI and you can use a few other things there. But there's a lot of capabilities here. And I would challenge, if you don't have an IT person at your dealership, and depending on your size, it might be time for that, or you might use ChatGPT a little bit more. You might reach out and see what is available for building things. But for sure, if you have an accountant or a controller or a GM, which most of you do, most of you should know how to work in spreadsheets. You should be able to, it will help you work way faster, being able to understand information if you spend a little bit of time learning about how spreadsheets work, or being able to get the data out of Lightspeed, or build that report back into Lightspeed and really use the data in the system. So we are up on time. Mark, Brian, any questions or things that we want to kind of dig into? I'm just going to roll through my agenda, see if there's anything else that I wanted to say before we kind of finish up here.
I think you touched on the main question that I was struggling with there, and I think we'll continue to address that with Susie. But yeah, great information. I learned a lot. This is really powerful stuff, Brian. So thank you.
Yeah.
You said you're going to send out that list of shortcuts, both the one you use internally at TAG and also the Lightspeed one, to all the attendees?
Yep. We'll send those out. This is recorded. We'll send the recording out, so back to Mark's thing, you might put it on half-time speed and might put it on 2x speed, might not be as interesting to talk to.
Great big pot of coffee. Yep.
Yeah. Two times speed. It would be like Wile E. Coyote running around.
Pineapple.
But Lucas doesn't know what we're talking about, Tierney.
He'll learn.
That's funny. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Oh, go ahead.
Are we going to run a poll maybe to see what the interest is from the attendees on potential future meetings and topics?
Yeah, let me throw a poll out there real quick for people here.
Or if there's anything else you'd like to see, you can drop it in the chat too.
Yeah,
we've discussed some different options. If those of y'all haven't seen it on LinkedIn, we've been working on some custom GPTs lately too. We've got one where you can just screenshot your warranty screen in Lightspeed, the overall work and the notes from the technician, and it'll turn that into the contention, cause, and correction that you can submit to the manufacturers. So we've uploaded all of the different OEM warranty handbooks, so it kind of knows what they're looking for. That's been a time saver for the dealers who are using that. We've talked about doing one of these future meetings on 3PA, so the ability to get Lightspeed data directly out without having to run a CSV, and working on a custom GPT to help with that, to actually write those power queries. So always looking for ideas on things that we can do to make life easier for everyone.
Yeah, so feel free to answer in the poll or in the chat. And thank you to everybody that made it this far. I knew this one was a nerdy session, not a lot of excitement maybe. but there's hopefully just opened your eyes to the world of possible. And maybe, everybody can take something new from there, or learn, think about there's things that we should do to speed up some of our processes. If you're constantly finding yourself on paper, I think that this is the perfect time for you to learn. You don't necessarily need paper. And you're maybe spending a lot of time in there, but in a couple of responses in there, we'll leave it open for a minute or two, but again, we're happy everybody could join us today. Brian, thank you for joining and being a part of it in the chat, and Mark for your input in Excel and Power Query. And we will look forward to the next one when we throw it in there. Looks like Mark's added the GPT to the chat. Is that the warranty one?
Yes, sir, it is.
Perfect.
I think if we keep going with this, Lucas, we're going to get down to the point where we've got a webinar that interests one person.
Yeah, we're getting closer. We're getting closer for sure.
I've got one other GPT that I will share. This one, the way that it works is you can take a part number out of Lightspeed, and if you just drop it into that GPT, it'll go out and search and come up with some fitment for that part. And we've been putting that content into the notes section in Lightspeed so that we kind of know exactly what something fits and when we want to restock it. That one takes a little bit longer. Could be, 15, 20 seconds, sometimes a little bit more. But kind of useful to determine what things fit when we're running through our suggested orders. If we're not sure what something goes on, if we want to restock it, we can drop it in there and see what it fits.
We've got a couple poll responses here where we just want more Mark. That came up. Perfect. More Mark. We've got some saying basic and like Lightspeed point of sale training. So maybe the front end of Lightspeed. Just want to bring up, we do have another, so the accounting guys, we host, we call it Tag Your It Thursday. Sometimes Mark is able to join when he's available. But it's a Q&A open forum session that we do. That's an hour where we don't have anything prepared. We're just waiting for questions. And then we can kind of dig into that as well. If you feel like you need a lot of support or maybe even a little, that's what the accounting guys is we're an accounting firm that specializes in dealership accounting. Lightspeed specifically, we work with just north of 300 dealerships on a monthly basis with, in all sorts of different fashions, whether it's just over the shoulder controller support, or if it's, we do some of your outsourced accounting processes for you. Our biggest vision for our clients is we want the dealership to be independent. How do we get it to where it can run on its own? And we're happy to kind of train ourselves out of a job, but we want to make sure that the dealership can be successful. So let us know if you have questions or a need for that. It's always fun to get Mark involved, where he's lived it. He's also been part of the 20 groups and a big player in the industry. I feel like that guy, Mark, he has way more information in his brain stored than most people do. He pulls out numbers and I'm just wondering, how is he getting all that information? He might have a chip in there reading ChatGPT all day long to him, but it is, it's always a good time to have Mark join us, or that we can get together, and Bryan Tierney as well, just to give us some insights on Lightspeed and the experience there. But I think that we are good on time. Any last comments or thoughts from anybody?
I just want to say thank you for having me. Thanks, amigos, for having the third amigo along for the ride. It's been a pleasure. I wanted to throw out there for some basic Lightspeed front end webinar video content. I put a link in the chat for Lightspeed's website, our webinars page, where we've got some webinars on deck for the future, some that you can sign up for and attend, that will give you some front end training. And there's also some recorded versions of webinars we've done in the past that we welcome you to check out. I'd love to see you on some of those as well. So again, thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for being a part of this.
Yep, appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for the team at TAG for putting all this together. So I'd probably still be winging it today if you guys hadn't reached out. So it's been good.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll look forward to the next one.
Yeah, have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.